Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 287, Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 2. And this card is stacked from top to bottom with incredible fights. And opening up the pay-per-view main card, we have Raul Rosas Jr. versus Christian Rodriguez. And this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this bantamweight matchup. And I'll be doing a bunch more UFC 287 prediction videos. I'll link my entire UFC 287 playlist down in the description if you want to go check out any of those predictions after this. But this is a fight that I've been a bit critical of, but I am looking forward to. I just want it with all the hype behind Raul Rosas Jr., with all the talk of him becoming the youngest UFC champion ever. I wanted to see him have a bigger step up in competition than a guy like Christian Rodriguez. But in terms of, does this fight make sense from an experience standpoint? I think it makes perfect sense. Both guys are younger guys. Both guys are relatively inexperienced in terms of pro MMA fights. And I think this is a fight where can Raul Rosas Jr. keep the hype rolling? There's so much hype coming from Dana White's Contender Series behind Raul Rosas Jr. being 18 years old, 17 when he was on Dana White's Contender Series. He made a massive UFC debut at UFC 282. And now he's getting a Christian Rodriguez who I don't think is the elite of the elite by any means, but Christian Rodriguez could definitely play spoiler here. So this is a massive fight for Raul Rosas Jr. because if he loses here, he's young, he can still rebuild, but he can never regarner the hype that he has currently coming off of Dana White's Contender Series and coming off that super impressive UFC debut. And for Christian Rodriguez, this is a big fight for him because there's something to be said for ending the hype train. And if Christian Rodriguez goes out there and stops Raul Rosas Jr. or just wins impressively, people are going to remember his name. He is the guy that ended the hype train of Raul Rosas Jr. So this is a very important fight. It's going to be a very interesting fight skill-wise because both these guys are so inexperienced, have so few fights. Both of them are a bit of an unknown, but I'm really looking forward to this matchup, and I can't wait. I think it should probably be on the prelims, but it's opening up the main card. I understand why the UFC is doing that, but I think this is a matchup that will be very fun. And when I look at fights, I look at fights that answer questions. That's what I'm most excited for, and I think this fight will answer some questions in terms of where are both these guys' skill sets at. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Raul Rosas Jr., who's 7-0, Christian Rodriguez, who's 8-1. Neither guy is ranked. Rosas Jr. is 18 years old. Rodriguez is 25. Rosas Jr. is 5'9". Rodriguez is 5'7". Rosas Jr. has a 67-inch reach, and Rodriguez has a 71-inch reach. So a 2-inch height advantage for Raul Rosas and a 4-inch reach advantage for Christian Rodriguez. So if you look at Christian Rodriguez, of his 8 pro MMA wins, 3 wins by KO, TKO, 4 wins by submission, 1 win by decision. His only losses in the UFC via decision. His last fight was in October of 2022 against Joshua Weems. This was a fight that was mildly competitive. Weems was able to take him down a couple times, but Rodriguez was able to fight back to his feet. And eventually in the late first round, Weems takes him down and then leaves his head in a bad position, and Christian Rodriguez just snatches up a guillotine and finishes him towards the end of the first round. Now, what does this win really mean? It doesn't really mean a whole lot. How good is Joshua Weems? Not particularly good. But still, nonetheless, he was being taken down, and he found a guillotine, and that is a move that he likes to pull off quite a bit. His UFC debut was against Jonathan Pierce, who is a very good fighter himself. Not the elite of the elite by any means, but this was a stiff test for Rodriguez. Ultimately, he lost this fight via decision, but he had some moments in this fight. Jonathan Pierce was taking him down. There was a couple times where Christian Rodriguez was just snatching up the guillotine, and they looked so tight, and I thought he was going to finish the fight, and somehow Jonathan Pierce would fight out of these guillotines. And Rodriguez was looking for submissions nonstop throughout the fight. He had some moments of top control, but ultimately Jonathan Pierce was just able to take him down, grind him out, get his back, control him, do some damage there, and ultimately win a decision in this fight. But not a horrible loss to have. Look at Jonathan Pierce. I believe he's fighting Bryce Mitchell in his next fight. So we see where Jonathan Pierce has kind of went since then. But you look at his opponents before his UFC debut, it's not looking good. His last opponent before that was 19-36, 36 losses. That's crazy. The opponent before that, 5-1. The opponent before that, 4-2. The opponent before that, 2-0. Now, I understand that Rodriguez is still super young, and I understand that's why, the opponent's records are what they are. but it just kind of tells you about the skill level he's been facing to this point until he's gotten into the UFC. So if you look at Raul Rosas Jr., 7-0. Of those 7 wins, 1 win by KO, TKO, 5 wins by submission, and 1 by decision. His last fight was at UFC 282 against Jay Perrin, and what an incredible debut this was. This was back in December of 2022. He went out there was very limited striking. He shot in on a takedown, lifted Jay Perrin up, basically slammed him to the ground, eventually gets his back, takes him down, flattens him out, or not takes him down, but gets his back, flattens him out, controls him, beats him up. Jay Perrin finds his way back to his feet, but he's still on his back, getting controlled, eventually gets back down to the ground. And Jay Perrin was defending this choke very well. There were so many times Raul Rosas Jr. was trying to get this rear naked, and Jay Perrin was fighting the hands and doing the right things to defend the choke. And eventually Raul Rosas Jr. halfway through the first round finds a rear naked choke. And Jay Perrin, I know he's no longer with the organization. UFC has since cut him. But he's not a trash can by any means. This was a good UFC debut opponent for Raul Rosas Jr., and I think it's a quality win. Again, I don't think Jay Perrin's the elite of the elite, but he's a quality, well-rounded opponent. And Raul Rosas Jr., I wasn't a massive believer in him before that fight, and I'm not a huge believer now, but I was very impressed with what he was able to do against a guy like Jay Perrin, who's been around for a bit, a little bit of a veteran in the sport. And he was just able to go out there and easily defeat him in the first round. Now, if you look at his fight before that, that was on the Dana White's Contender Series. He fought Mando Gutierrez. He won this fight via decision. It didn't really show a whole lot. He had very good grappling in this fight. He was just overly aggressive a bit, making mistakes, kind of falling off the top. But ultimately, his skill set and his skills were just above the level of Mando Gutierrez. He was able to control him, able to get the back repeatedly. Even when he made mistakes, he was able to get back in dominant positions, control him. He wasn't able to get a finish, but he was constantly looking for a finish throughout the fight, constantly looking to set up chokes, constantly looking to set up arm bars. Even in the third round, he was going for submission finishes in the third round. So it wasn't a bad performance by any means, but it showed how inexperienced he was in this fight. But he was throwing flying knees. He was being super dynamic. He was clearly trying to get a contract, and he looked super impressive at 17 years old. And it was crazy to see, and that's kind of what built the hype of Raul Rosas Jr., and then he built on it in the Jay Perrin fight. Outside of that, fights before the UFC, he fought a guy who was 0-2, a guy who was 2-0, a guy who was 1-0, a guy who was 0-0, and a guy who was 0-1. So he hasn't really fought the cream of the crop type competition, basically guys starting out in their career. So it used to be, it would be a while before a guy could make his way to the UFC, but the barrier of entry for the UFC has lowered quite a bit. And that's not to say Raul Rosas Jr. isn't skilled, but I'm just saying years ago, 5-6 years ago, the UFC would have never signed a guy like Raul Rosas Jr., who was so young and early on in his career. And I think sometimes that can be a detriment. Raul Rosas Jr. now comes into the UFC, and, how is he going to do with such limited experience? But at least in this matchup, he's fighting a guy in Christian Rodriguez who has very limited experience himself, only has 9 fights. Raul Rosas Jr. has 7 fights. So it kind of makes sense. This is good matchmaking. As far as the fight, how do I see the fight going? I do not believe that Raul Rosas Jr. is going to go out there and just steamroll Christian Rodriguez, but I do believe the grappling of Raul Rosas Jr., the offensive wrestling, the takedown ability is what will win him this fight. I am going to go Raul Rosas Jr. second round rear naked choke finish. I think it's going to be a competitive fight, but I just think he's going to be too big, too strong for Christian Rodriguez. We've seen Christian Rodriguez getting taken down by Jonathan Pierce. We've seen him getting taken down by Joshua Weems. Now, he does have that guillotine. It would not shock me to see an upset of Christian Rodriguez with his guillotine. His guillotine is lightning fast. He finds it from weird position. But I think Raul Rosas Jr. is very good. I think he'll fight out of these submission attempts. I think he's going to be expecting it. I think they're game planning for it. And I just think, I've seen Christian Rodriguez in his last fights give up his back. And I think once Raul Rosas Jr. gets on your back, it's very difficult to get him off. He has a great body triangle. He has great control. It's hard to shake him off the top. He's super flexible. And I just think Raul Rosas Jr. is going to get him down, going to control him on the ground, going to avoid the guillotine attempts. And I just think the grappling of Raul is going to be too much for Christian Rodriguez. I think it'll be close in the first. I think he'll get him down, and I think Rodriguez will maybe find his way back to his feet, maybe use a guillotine to sweep him or something along those lines. And I think in the first round it'll be competitive. And I think Christian Rodriguez has a massive advantage on the feet. I think he's the better striker. Raul Rosas Jr., It's kind of wild, kind of crazy, but the striking isn't particularly technical. And he's primarily a grappler, a guy who's looking for submissions. So I think Rodriguez does have the striking advantage, but I don't think he'll be able to defend the takedown. And I think Raul Rosas Jr. is just going to be relentless with the takedown, shoot in on takedowns. I think he'll be able to get them, and I think he'll be able to get advantageous positions and eventually work his way to his back. And I think the first round, it'll probably be, where he gets him down, Rodriguez gets back to his feet, but then he gets him down again and gets in a good position, but isn't able to find a finish, but maybe he gets close. And then I think in the second round, he'll be able to get him down again. Christian Rodriguez will be a little bit more tired, a little bit more drained from the grappling. And I think Raul Rosas Jr., once he gets on that back, he is constantly looking for that rear naked choke. And I think in that second round, Raul Rosas Jr. will find a rear naked choke and finish Christian Rodriguez. And I think the hype train will continue. The only way I really see Christian Rodriguez winning this fight is most likely by a guillotine. I don't think Raul Rosas Jr. is going to let him get off shots, get off strikes, and look for a knockout. And I just think in those transitional spaces, Christian Rodriguez is going to have to look for a guillotine, which he's very good at. So that would be, if Christian Rodriguez wins this, I think it'll be like a first round guillotine. But ultimately, I think Raul Rosas Jr.'s BJJ is really good. I think his submission ability is really good. I think his wrestling's really good. And I think he'll be able to go out there, exploit the holes that we've already seen in Christian Rodriguez's game, and eventually get that second round rear naked choke submission win. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Who are you picking in this fight? Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.